And the end result was that 4 Chicago firemen were killed, 8 Columbian Exposition firemen were killed. They had their own fire department out there. But they were officered by and commanded by Chicago firefighters, and 3 civilians were killed, including the building engineer. What they later found out was that there was an electrician and his helper working at the base of the tower, and in those days they made connections by soldering rather than, wing nuts and that kind of stuff. And so they think that they set fire to it. Now this particular statue of Columbus was on display in the Columbian Exposition. When the fair closed, the directors of the fair decided to give this statue of Columbus, which is made out of, I don't know what it's made out of, but it's like zinc or something.
Zinc,
yeah.
real, very thin zinc.
Yeah, it's about, how tall is it, Chief? About, with its pedestal, it's about
That's
like
a good
12
11,
feet.
11 foot.
Yeah. But you can actually move it, you can turn it by hand.
So it's hollow?
It's
Yes.
hollow. Yeah, it's hollow.
Yeah. You
And-
could, if it didn't have the steel base, you could just pick it up.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you could pick it up. And what happened was that at that time the battalion chief, a fellow by the name of Joseph Kenyon, was chief of the 12th Battalion, then at 63rd in Wentworth. In fact, the building had the name Englewood on it. It was a combined police and fire station. That was his headquarters, and he had gone to the fire. And so they presented the statue to the fire department, and it was on display on Wentworth Avenue, just north of the firehouse, just a few feet north, for many, many years until they donated it in 1894. It was still there until 1960, 1960, and I took pictures of it. And the firemen would paint it, usually red. A lot of red paint. I wonder where that came from. And red and white. And he's holding a globe, and he's got something in each hand. And well, eventually they closed the firehouse, and they combined it with the firehouse at 60th and State. And supposedly they moved Columbus over there, but then he wound up in the repair shops. But then he was and got dusty, but then he was refurbished, and you can see he's been repainted, natural colors. I can see yellow and black and sort of an orangey, tunic there. And eventually it came to the fire museum. No one really knew what to do with it, truthfully. But that's the story behind it,
Has it ever been in parades? Do they ever take it out for the Columbus Day Parade? Or?
We do, because they want it, but we're afraid that
2 years ago, we were
it'll
asked
never come back.
by the Knights of Columbus, after we got it, we had a fire department vehicle, and we put this in the back of it, and every official at that parade from the Italian community just marveled at it. I mean, they just, this was the hit of the parade. Since then, we have not done it because we're just afraid something will happen. I have been contacted by several people in the Italian community, the Sons of Italy and all these different organizations, that they would, just let us use it for a couple of weeks, and we'll get it back to you, oh yeah, sure. It's here. If you want to see it, come join the museum, and we'll take your picture by it, but it's one of a kind. It's priceless.
Yeah.
We're very proud of that.
Yeah. I forgot to mention, it wound up at the 911 center. Remember,
Yes, it
was
did.
on display
Yeah.
there. Yeah. And that fire is not too well known, except in fire department circles. There is a monument at Oakwood Cemetery to the people who were killed there, but they're not buried there. It's just a monument to that.
Yeah.
Every fireman donated a dime or something subscribe to that monument. But it is very unique, and
And that fire was not, that was not a rarity. You know, a lot of those buildings burned after
after the fire. That's how they got
yeah.
rid. That's the
They got rid of the,
wrecking
they
company.
didn't have, Hennigan Wrecking at that.
Were they basically plywood or something anyway, or what were they made of?
It was called staff. It was wood, and then the staff was
Chipwood or something?
it was fiber. They didn't have chipwood. That's what it
Flake
was.
wood or, yeah.
I mean, it looked good when it was new, right?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it looked like granite,
Yeah.
and but it really wasn't. And it was a combination of, I guess you'd call it, would be an early form of drywall, really, Jack. It was plastered, and then it was.
There were a few statues. They weren't all alike. They were probably done by different companies or whatever, but this is really the only one left.
Yeah.
And, it is unique, like I say, it's zinc.
There's that one in Jackson Park, that Golden
Yeah.
Progress or something? Or what
Oh, that was not.
Statue of the
is it?
Republic.
Is that from it?
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. And that's
That
about.
was at the top of a pedestal, I believe, wasn't it? Like a tall column?
Yeah,
A tall
yeah.
column which had it at the top.
Well, that's the original. The one that's there now is a replica, or a smaller version. I shouldn't say replica. Maybe it is. But it's about, I don't know, 1/2 the size of the original, which was out in the middle of a lagoon.
Right.
By the way, Sal made a comment at the park, at the west end of the park at Loomis and Lexington. There is a statue of Christopher Columbus there.
Now, where did this statue? Do you know where it actually was placed at the exposition?
Yeah, no, I really don't.
No one knows exactly.
Nobody
No, I
knows
don't know.
exactly, no.
There
Just
were,
that it was definitely
We
there
did-
at the
Oh, yeah,
exposition.
it
Yeah,
was-
we did extensive research on that. We couldn't find anything else
No.
No pictures.
on it, no.
No. But-
People come into the Fire Museum and figure that's St. Florian, the
Yeah.
patron of firemen, and
Yeah.
no, it's,
Yeah, no, he was a
It's
Roman
Chris.
soldier. Yeah.
Right.
You know what? I had a lady contact me many, many years ago, while I was still active, and she was in a society that was trying to trace artifacts from the Columbian Exposition, as much as they could, like what's still around and where is it, And she knew about this statue, and she was wondering where it was, and I said, I think it was at the repair shops at the time, because I know I saw it up there, up on the second floor, and but it already had been refurbished at that time, because it had that paint color, and then it was refurbished again maybe in the, I don't know, 1990s or so. I don't know what they did with it, but
There were no portraits or busts or statues made of Columbus during his lifetime. So no one knows exactly what Columbus looked like. All the pictures that you see of Columbus are just speculation based on whatever description there was of his appearance in the records. But none of the pictures that we have of him we know for certain are
sure.
accurate
Yeah.
representations of what he looked like.
A lot of people do Sable, and that, and it's really it was again a Chicago tragedy, with all these firemen getting killed there, and believe it or not, I found a journal, fire department journal, for that year, and it showed the response, showed the box number. They had their own fire alarm system in the fair. There were 9,000 numbered boxes. Boxes were numbered in the 9,000 series. I'll say that right. And there it is, the alarm coming in and the specials and what units were on it. We have all that information.
Now, you said that there was a separate World's Fair fire service. Did the department loan equipment to them, or did they go out and buy Did they go out and buy new engines just
Yes.
for use at the exposition?
Yes, yeah. And I'm glad you mentioned that. They organized about 8 companies there, and they hired firemen, but they needed experienced officers, so they had Chicago Fire Department officers. Generally, they'd have a lieutenant temporarily promoted to captain, and a firefighter promoted to lieutenant, and they took command of the companies. And they had, when I say 8 companies, they had 8 firehouses, including Chicago.
8 houses on the grounds of the.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Well, because they knew that, John...
Danger of fire.
Well, not only that, but, yeah, they were all wooden buildings, but they had congestion, you know, they knew that they could
And they
not-
all remembered 1871.
Yeah, and,
right, yeah.
and they even had a firehouse on the Midway, and
One thing Chicago would be worried about would be fire.
Yeah, and Chicago organized Engine 63 out there, and we also organized a fireboat, Engine 71, and we organized a battalion, the 14th Battalion, and that chief was in charge of the Chicago Fire Companies and the Columbian Companies. And after it's funny you mentioned about the equipment.
What
After
became of it after what would they do with all those
what
units?
they gave the fireboat, which was called the Fire Queen, they gave it to Chicago for services rendered, and one of the steamers was given to, at least one was given to Chicago, and we still have it, and it's at the Fire Academy. It actually pumped at the coal storage fire. Yeah, it was an Aaron steamer, and they gave it to Chicago. We organized Engine 70 then at 2100 Eastwood on it, and it was in service until 1922, and it's still on display at the Fire Academy. And we really should put that information on there. And the reason we know it because of the serial number.
What about all the men? Did any of the men that were in this World's Fair Fire Service, did any of them make it into the Chicago Fire Department then?
You know, we really don't know because we don't know who they hired, you know, but we do have pictures of them, and they had a distinctive uniform, and it was similar. Remember, they had their own police department called the Columbian Guards, and we don't know what became of them, but they wore a distinctive uniform, you know. So yeah, and they were the Chicago set up I don't know how many 75 fire alarm boxes throughout the the fairgrounds, and they were numbered in the 9,000 series, and we have a record of all the alarms, you know.
Wow.
So it was well covered then, huh?
It was well covered, and the big fires occurred, that was the only fire that I know of occurred during the fair, which was only about a 6-month period.
You weren't at that one, were you, Bill?
No.
No. Squad 11 taking the 211 at 63rd and Stony Island. But after the fair, they burned down a lot of the buildings.
Oh, yeah.
That was strictly one summer. It didn't carry over into a second year like the New York
Yeah.
World's Fair. And
Yeah, or our World's Fair. No, and there are pictures of the buildings burning, you know, and we have photos of that. We have a pretty good record, and a record of all the extra alarms, you know.
But the buildings were framed with stucco, right?
Yeah, it was a stucco, and they called it staff. It was sort of a plaster with a stiffening of what they called, it was like jute, and they called it staff because it was a fiber that I figured it was something like a matting or something like that.
You know, they knew that it was just going to be temporary,
Yeah.
so they weren't going to throw a ton of dough into
No,
this thing.
but you know, some of the buildings, like the one that's still, you know,
It's still there.
Still
Yeah,
there.
well, that was, you know.
Museum of Science.
yeah, the Museum of Science and Industry. But they had a building there that was, they call it the Manufacturers Building.
Mm-hmm.
It was 1,787 feet long and 687 feet wide. Said it not only is the largest building in the world, it said you could put St. Peter's Church in the square in the middle of this building and never touch the four walls. They had one part of, they had an auditorium that could seat 100,000 people, and that was only in one section of the building. It was by far the largest building in the world. That had a steel-supported roof, so they spent money on that, you know, and it was only there for, 6 months. And of course, the big maybe attraction was the first Ferris wheel.
Ferris wheel.
Which was on the Midway, and some years ago they were digging out the Midway because they have a little theater, a summer theater. They show movies out in the summertime, and they found part of the footings of the Ferris wheel, so they know exactly where the Ferris wheel was. So yeah, it was a great.
Yeah.
A lot of people that, in later years, Florence Ziegfeld, Bernard McFadden, Dowie from, was it Dowie?
Ziegfeld had Eugene Sandow under contract, and that was like the beginning of physique display or bodybuilding, because he's been a circus strongman, and he said, no, let's just do your poses,
Yeah, Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
recreated in that great Ziegfeld film with Nat Pendleton plays the part.
Yeah.
Ziegfeld,
Olympic
that was,
wrestler.
that was the beginning of Ziegfeld's
I think it was
career
the
as a
beginning
showman.
of his.